My name is Elliott, and I'd like to take a moment to share some thoughts on making art in the midst of a global pandemic.
Tonight, with hospitals at a breaking point and some morgues filling fast, all 50 states across our nation now have COVID cases on the rise by at least double digits.
I hope to quickly lay the groundwork by clarifying a few terms, then directly address the shifting landscape artists inhabit today. We're going to use a diagram that I've constructed. You can think of it as a kind of map to discuss some of the ways art making is changing in the face of both the global pandemic and the global social justice movements. When we see art, we're looking at ideas. In both the landscape painting of Bob Ross and the sculpture of Eva Hesse.
Hello, I'm Bob Ross, and I'd like to welcome you to the 10th Joy of Painting series.
What we're really looking at is a whole set of assumptions on the part of the artist about what a work of art is, how it functions in culture, and what role the artist plays. I'm going to make the case that the assumptions about the work of art, the ideas that most artists working today bring to the studio, are informed by 5 essential ideas. We're going to examine 4 categories of traditional aesthetics with examples of both historical and contemporary practitioners, a 5th, postmodern category, and metamodernist oscillation. Then I'm going to try to show how shifting cultural pressures are working to galvanize, to call into question, to redefine 4 of these ideas. We're going to look to philosophy, the theoretical basis of a particular branch of knowledge or experience, to clarify some of what's happening in the studio. More specifically, we're going to look to aesthetics, which we can think of as that specific branch of philosophy that deals with what's to be valued in art. It's important to point out that when we look to aesthetics, we're going to be using a kind of analytical knife to dissect historical conversations about what art is and what purpose it serves in the lives of people. It can be helpful to think of aesthetics as a set of lenses through which we try to understand the function and purpose of art. In the real world, the real practice of making art in the studio, which is my concern, rarely fits cleanly into strict categories. Yet looking to philosophy is one of the most effective ways for the practicing artist to understand the challenges of making art in the midst of a global pandemic. Now, in traditional aesthetics, historically, there are 4 broad categories of art. Each of these 4 categories is anchored by a body of thinking that tries to explain what art is, how art functions in society, and what role the artist plays. The definition of the work of art and its function is being redefined in the face of massive social change. I'm going to quickly drill down into the 4 traditional aesthetic categories. Don't be confused. The assumptions underpinning your work, or the work of your favorite contemporary artist making work right now, may very well be informed by the ideas in these first 4 categories. Ideas have consequences, and they have consequences on how your work performs in culture and how you as an artist perform. Formalism, the first of our categories, suggests that the most important element of a work of art is its form, the way it's made, its purely visual aspects, rather than its narrative content or its relationship to the visible world. You can think of this art as art for art's sake. In this position, the work of art can be detached from other ethical or social considerations. Immanuel Kant, G.W.F. Hegel, Clive Bell, and Clement Greenberg all anchor the thinking behind this approach to art. Formalism is not a set of ideas or assumptions solely relegated to the dustbin of art history. While we can see and understand these ideas by calling to mind the work of Jackson Pollock, artists today are informed by the very same set of assumptions, as we can see in the entire zombie formalism movement or the work of Lucian Smith. The second category of traditional aesthetics is realism. In realism, there is a way that the world really is, and to get to that, we must show it, we must mirror it as accurately as possible. In this approach to a work of art should look like what it is meant to show. You know you're looking through a realist lens when you seem to be looking through the work of art to the subject depicted as if the picture, painting, object was transparent. We can see clear examples of realism That idea that the artist has unique purchase to an underlying truth in the work of Lucian Freud. These assumptions can also be seen today in the work of the painter Terry Rogers. The third category of art in traditional aesthetics is Expressionism. In Expressionism, artists are people inspired by emotional experiences who use their skill to embody their emotions in a work of art. The Expressionist approach to the definition of art is anchored by the thinking of Leo Tolstoy, R.G. Collingwood, and Arthur Danto. Now, there are subcategories of Expressionism, including cognitive Expressionism, that state that the work of art is a unique kind of thinking, and that the work of art exists and comes to life in the mind of the viewer. In this approach, the viewer is a collaborator and transforms emotion and thinking into knowledge of the self. The Expressionist approach to the definition of art is anchored by the thinking of Leo Tolstoy, R.G. Collingwood, and Arthur Danto. Willem de Kooning and Egon Schiele are classic examples of an Expressionist approach to art, while today we can see Expressionism play itself out in the work of the Neue Leipzig school painter Neo Rausch. The final category of traditional aesthetics is Instrumentalism. Instrumentalism understands the work of art as a tool, an instrument of social engagement. The idea that art should be an instrument for furthering a point of view that is moral, social, religious, or political is in some ways the definition of instrumentalism. Instrumentalist art is persuasive. We can find an historical example of instrumentalist art in the work of John Hartfield. While today, from Banksy to countless Instagram artists, a considerable swath of contemporary practice is instrumentalist in nature. The category of instrumentalism is anchored by the thinking of John Dewey. Now, there is a fifth category of aesthetics that falls outside of these traditional definitions of art. Postmodern aesthetics draws a clear line between traditional definitions of art and art making and what it sees as contemporary practice. Postmodern aesthetics is a move beyond institutional frameworks for the work of art and primarily and above all else sees the work of art as a critique of power. Nearly all forms of postmodern aesthetics, supported by the philosophies of Marx, Nietzsche, Sartre, and Foucault, are underpinned by three essential negations. Postmodern aesthetics is against totalization. It's against universalist claims, against claims of essential human nature. Think of Jean-Paul Sartre as existence precedes essence. It's against global human destiny. Postmodern aesthetics is against teleology. It is against the idea that natural entities have an intrinsic purpose irrespective of human use or opinion. It is against telos, the full potential or inherent purpose or objective of a person or thing, similar to the notion of an end goal or raison d'etre. And finally, postmodern aesthetics is against utopianism. It's against collective destinations and the ultimate mastery of nature. Postmodern aesthetics is anchored by the thinking of Foucault, Lyotard, Merleau-Ponty, Karl Marx, Nietzsche, Rosalind Krauss, and Jean-Paul Sartre, to name a few. Under the umbrella of postmodern aesthetics, we can find the work of art situated as a form of Marxist critique, feminist critique, post-colonial critique, and gender and identity critique. The work of Barbara Kruger, with its focus on power, language, and discourse, is an example that is both historical and contemporary. Metamodernism can be seen as a strategy to try to rectify many of the obvious problems of postmodernism by reincorporating aspects of modernism. Metamodernist oscillation, defined as mediations between aspects of both modernism and postmodernism, translated into English, can be understood as I see, understand, and am living the many problems of a postmodern existence, including global neo-tribalism, individual solipsism, and a global culture steeped in nihilism, but just can't bring myself to embrace the absolute truth of the modern epic, because doing so would establish a controlling authority beyond the self. In many ways, the metamodernist embrace of, quote, the mercurial condition between truth and relativism, close quote, firmly positions metamodernism as a late form of postmodernism and as the ultimate waffler's philosophy. Now, whether or not an artist understands or even thinks about these issues, contemporary artwork being made right now is underpinned by the assumptions in these five categories. Every artist,
works from a set of assumptions. Assumptions about what they do and what purpose the work of art serves. Work ceases to be understood as art if it falls outside of these categories. With this as background, we can begin to see what's happening with art discourse as the pandemic roils culture globally, and as technology exposes in inescapable ways manifold social problems, including police brutality. Marxist critique and post-colonial critique understand 3 of the 4 traditional categories of aesthetics as complicit in class, race, gender, and environmental oppression. Instrumentalism, the 4th category of traditional aesthetics, has been moved into the category of postmodern critique, so long as the work of art is a tool of Marxist class struggle. In very practical ways, the last 40 years of art making has been ruled by a condition of postmodern pluralism. Seemingly one of the net effects of both the global pandemic, social media, and the panopticon, the all-seeing eye of the cell phone camera, and its capacity to expose long-standing abuses of institutional power, is the end of the pluralist approach to art making.